Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all very much for coming. I'd just like to make a few comments, and Minister Mason, the House Leader, will make a few comments, and then we'll be happy to take your questions. So, our government began this session with a commitment to make life better for Albertans. And to do that, we introduced a number of practical measures to help create good jobs, to protect the education and healthcare services families need, and to make life more affordable for Albertans. Let's start with jobs. To help create good construction jobs, we're building badly needed new schools, a new hospital in Edmonton, critical new transportation infrastructure in Calgary, Fort Saskatchewan, and in communities across Alberta. We also partnered with the Petroleum Services Association of Canada to expedite orphan well reclamation and to put nearly 1,700 people to work in our energy industry. To protect workers in our trade-exposed industries, we were the first of any province to travel to Washington to stand up for Albertans working in industries that rely on cross-border trade: energy, forestry, manufacturing, and agriculture. And we're continuing to stand up for the approval of the Kinder Morgan Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion, with our request for intervenor status being granted by the courts. The decisions we made to create jobs, to actively invest in Albertans, and to stimulate the economy are rooted in the belief that in a down economy, government should have the backs of regular working families. Rather than making reckless cuts to services, cuts that take money and people out of the economy, we're investing in our province. And it's working. Conference Board of Canada has said Alberta's economy will be the fastest growing in the country this year, and as you know, they recently upgraded their projection of our GDP growth from 2.8% to 3.3%. Our economy is slowly turning the corner. We're not out of the woods yet, by no means, but there are the beginnings of positive signs. Private sector investment is up, new vehicle sales are up, wholesale trade is up, housing starts are up, manufacturing is up, drilling is up, exports are up. And the Canadian Federation of Independent Business has reported that small business confidence is up, the highest it's been since December 2014. At the same time that we're growing the economy and creating jobs, we are protecting and improving the public services that people need. We're making sure that our young people get a great education, patients get the health care they need, and our most vulnerable citizens are better supported. We made sure that our funding for schools, healthcare, and municipalities is stable and predictable, a key watchword that our government ran in the last election, from which we have not diverged. We also modernized our labor and employment standards laws that had not been updated in 30 years, and in doing so, we are helping to create better, safer, and fairer workplaces in Alberta. Never again will Albertans like Amanda Jensen have to fear for their job for taking unpaid time off of work to care for a child or a loved one who is ill. We also introduced legislation that provided better protection and remedies for women and families fleeing domestic violence. We enhanced government transparency by introducing and passing whistleblowers legislation so that whistleblowers themselves feel safer coming forward. We're better protecting consumers from getting ripped off, especially when it comes to protecting the biggest purchase most Albertans will make in their lifetimes, their homes. We also changed security laws to better protect investors. We took new steps to tackle opioid overdoses and make our communities safer. And we took an important step forward to improve the child death review process, critically important work. And while we know much work still lies ahead, as we move forward on the second phase of the review that is aimed at making those children much safer, we will continue to work hard on that with colleagues across the legislature. To make life more affordable, we cut school fees by 25%. We're helping more kids get healthy meals throughout our school meals program. We continued our tuition freeze. We capped electricity rates. We're sending carbon rebates to two-thirds of Alberta households. We're making it easier to get energy-efficient products that help cut household electricity bills. And we're building more affordable housing for seniors and families. I'm proud of the work that we've accomplished this session, and I'm proud of the team of government MLAs who worked tirelessly to get all of this work done. Each and every member of our team worked day in and day out to make life better for the people that they serve. And we're going to keep working every day to create jobs, protect public services, and make life more affordable for Albertans. It's why Albertans put us here, and we will never forget it. So thank you, and I'll pass you over to Minister Mason.
Thank you very much, Premier. As Premier Notley has she noticed it, but she's also noted it. We've accomplished a lot this session, and we've had a very busy legislative session, and we did what we set out to do. I don't think the opposition really had such a great session. They seem to be more concerned with appealing to the fringes, the extreme fringes of their leadership drama than they were with helping Albertans weather the economic downturn. They talked down our province every chance they got, cheering for Alberta to fail and putting their own political interests ahead of the interests of Alberta families, especially when it comes to pipelines. You know, I'm very discouraged at the way they try to undermine any sort of confidence or good news in Alberta's future. Their leader, Brian Jean, lost a week trying to untangle his position on outing gay kids at school, and that's the same issue that sent Jason Kenney into hiding for a whole month. Brian Jean, for the life of him, couldn't take a position on whether or not he supports school lunches, and he got slapped on the wrist for taking illicit corporate sponsorships. The PC caucus had to apologize for Rick McIver and Prab Gill, who on separate occasions both attacked and insulted people with disabilities. The opposition demanded that we cut $3.5 billion from the budget or to raise taxes by the same amount, and that would have just put the education and health of Albertans at risk. They had to go on the defense again and again, and they were trying to distance themselves from members of their own party. They were trying to explain why they didn't actually think that feminism is the same as cancer, or why a long overdue review of our education curriculum isn't exactly the same as the Hitler Youth. Not only did they vote against a bill that would protect Albertans like Amanda Jensen, but the Wild Rose and the PCs voted against the bill without even reading it. So it's sad to say, but they're getting more and more extreme with their beliefs, while at the same time less and less serious about the jobs they were elected to do. The duty of an opposition is to provide real alternatives to the major challenges facing the province, and they have not done that. They're very good at being critical, but that's only half of the opposition's job. The other half of the opposition's job is to put forward alternatives, and they have completely failed to do that. They resorted instead to cheap shots, grandstanding, and language that was emotionally charged and factually incorrect. The official opposition still remains the only one in recent memory that has not offered a shadow budget. Albertans deserve a lot better in their opposition, I think, than they got in this session. And as the Premier said, our government is here to make life better for people. That's why Albertans put us here. It's the work we're focused on every day, and we're not going to let hardworking Albertans down. Thank you.
We will now open it to questions.
They were pretty harsh words there, Brian, Minister. Sorry, they were very harsh words about the opposition.
Yeah.
Why are you using the opportunity now to basically just cut them down to nothing?
Well, because you know, we've just finished the session, and we didn't hear very many positive suggestions about the future of the province. There was a lot of emotionally charged speeches, but you know, we didn't really hear practical ideas to move the province forward. Having said that, I think our government is more open to working with opposition than the government was in my experience when we were in opposition. I believe that in the entire time that I was a member of the opposition, which was 15 years, they accepted, the previous government accepted one amendment of ours. We've tried to find amendments that the opposition have offered that we can support and worked with them to modify them so that they fit within the goals of the government's legislative agenda.
Give me an example of that.
Well, I think we saw last night a whole series of amendments on the bill to deal with children's services that were accepted by the government. I think there must Premier, was about 6.
There were 6, and there was at
6
least
that we
2
accepted.
where what happened was the minister went back and talked to them and said, I think we know what you're getting at here, but the way you're writing it isn't going to work for this reason or that reason. How about this different language? And so we proposed alternative language to them that we could then all support, even though it was under their amendment. So you'd see there's 2 or 3 amendments that were passed last night that were actually redrafted by the minister and her minister's staff in order to accommodate the legislative requirements, and then they presented it and we supported it. So there was a couple of examples of
I
that.
want to just give another example, if I may, and that is the creation of an all-party committee to deal with the children's services issue. That would never have happened under the previous government. And quite frankly, the Premier, as the critic, had some pretty good ideas about that file. So, you know, all oppositions have some good ideas, but we've tried as a government to incorporate those and to give the opposition a real role. It's just sad, from my point of view, that they can't go beyond that and offer a bigger vision of what they'd like to see for the province. That's only half the opposition's job, to criticize, and it's a legitimate one, but it's only half the job.
That's right. It's just a follow-up. It's like a good cop, bad cop scenario here. And this is unusual. I've never seen this happen. I've been here for a number of years as well, to have the government, in a sense, spend half their news conference attacking the opposition. It didn't happen before. So is this a new strategy now, just to take on the opposition whenever you have a chance, as opposed to ignoring them like what happened under the PC?
Well, I remember in opposition having my feelings hurt a couple of times in government news conferences, so I don't think that's really true, Graham. I think that they have, yeah.
We've seen in the past
Yeah,
where you have
yeah.
2 ministers, the Premier and a minister up there attacking the opposition like this. I don't recall that ever happening. When did it happen before?
Oh, I know it's
It never
happened
happened.
before, yeah.
I just as a follow-up.
Yeah, no, I'm going to have to beg to differ there with you. Well, we'll go do the work. I'm pretty sure, I will grant you it was more likely it was the PCs attacking the Wild Rose. I will give you that. They spent a little bit less airtime on us back in the day. Can't
mistake,
imagine
by
why. Yeah. But I think there was a fair amount of backing and forthing between those
A
two.
follow-up to this issue, speaking of the opposition. Today, we're talking to Brian Jean and saying if he became Premier, he would look at repealing some of the changes you made to the labor laws in this province. Not all of them, but he says he would actually look at reversing what you did. So what's your comment to that, and is there any way of stopping him from doing that?
Well, I think obviously the best way to stop him from doing that is to not let him become a premier of the province ever. I think in the larger context, what you saw in this session was the slow coming into greater and greater focus, the reality that there's 2 clear choices in this province. There is what I would argue is a fairly mainstream approach that is focused on making life better for Albertans by creating jobs, making life more affordable, and protecting those important public service sectors, or public services, versus what we saw from the opposition, which was, I would argue, a little bit more erratic and a great deal more extreme. $3.5 billion cut to operating expenses. I mean, that's significant. You need to think about what that actually looks like on the ground if you do that. The ridiculousness around their position on gay-straight alliances, their inability to actually decide that children should get lunch in school. These kinds of things paint a very clear distinction. And now you talk about the labor bill, and the reality is that bill essentially brought Alberta into line with the rest of the country, something that was long overdue. It was a very reasonable compromise. I'm very proud of the work that Minister Gray did on that. I think she walked the line in a very responsible way. The fact that the opposition walks around saying things like, we're going to repeal everything that the other guys did, well, that's not terribly thoughtful. And at the end of the day, I think it's important to ensure that you govern for all Albertans. And this notion that anybody who is a member of a union is somehow a union thug is language that belongs in 1910 Virginia. It does not belong in 2017 Alberta.
Premier, I want to talk about pipelines. You know, the issue came to the fore this session, and I'm just wondering, with everything in BC and how it's developing and the uncertainty, what impact that's having on how you look at Alberta's future. Is it causing you to recalibrate, or what impact is it having?
Well, I think our focus still remains very much on the successful commencement of the construction of that pipeline, hopefully in late fall. And of course, a lot of that falls around the decision-making process in the courts that we all know is lining up in early October. We've seen potential Premier John Horgan talk about seeking intervenor status for the BC government there. Frankly, I think that might be the best place to do it. I think that that's a reasonable forum within which to work through these issues around what is in the national interest and what is an appropriate accommodation of local concerns. And I'm hopeful that within that forum, the outcome will be that we've reached that appropriate balance and that the pipeline should go forward. So we're going to continue our work. That's why, of course, we've sought intervenor status and have been granted intervenor status. We will probably also, you'll see additional efforts on the part of the government of Alberta over the next little while to generally tell our story in BC to a greater degree. It doesn't necessarily mean we're going to change the minds of the leaders of the people who are opposing the pipelines, but you need people, when you lead a march, you need to have people following you. And if you can talk to those people who are debating on whether to be in that march or not, well, then you're making good progress. And so that's the work that we're going to be focused on over the summer.
Is there a time at which you have to change strategy?
Not at this point. No, I think that really what we need to do is focus on the law. We believe the law is on our side. We believe that the appropriate agency with the appropriate authority, i.e. the federal cabinet, made the right decision, and they made it based on the right considerations. You know, the opposition loves to equate this to Northern Gateway. But the reality is that Northern Gateway went down because of a judicial decision. And the work that was done with respect to Trans Mountain was done through the lens of the rules that were set out in the Northern Gateway decision. And so I feel pretty confident that the appropriate measures were taken.
Your opponents are using the summer to prep for 2019. Conservatives Uniting, Mr. Clark says he's going to build his party to be a centrist alternative. You've pretty much gotten through your platform. So what is this summer about? Is this summer about prepping for 2019 for you guys as well?
I wouldn't necessarily call it prepping for 2019, but what I will certainly say is that, you know, we have a long record of things that we have accomplished in this House. Even, you know, just 2 years in, our legislative record, the scope of the change that we brought in, which really does make life better for Albertans on so many different fronts, whether we're talking about jobs, whether we're talking about important services, whether we're talking about transparency and accountability, whether we're talking about the changes we made with respect to the ABC salary scale and the reduction in CEO salaries under the old Tory Wild Rose alignment there. We have a number of stories to tell to Albertans, and certainly there will be time taken between now and the next session, in addition to getting ready for the hard work that is necessary for the next session, to go out there and talk to Albertans about what our government has done and is doing for them, and to hear back from Albertans about what we can and should do better.
Premier, I want to get your thoughts on the city of Edmonton. Some councillors are extremely irate with government, saying that you're downloading outrage about supervised injection sites onto the city and onto councillors as a result. What are your thoughts? Do you think that's a valid concern that they have?
Well, I think I think that that's a bit of a pointed characterization of it. I think the reality is that safe injection sites are a fundamentally important tool in the fight against the opioid crisis that we are all facing. As a result of that, those safe injection sites need to be somewhere. The process for ensuring that those safe injection sites find a place to be must, by definition, involve the municipality and the communities. We have to invite them to the table and ask them for their input. That, therefore, means that they become part of a conversation where some people don't agree. But to not include them in the conversation, to simply say this is not their decision, it's all ours because we're never going to listen to them, would also be inappropriate. Because what you do need to do is work with your municipal partners and with your community partners to find the best spot. But I do believe that at the end of the day, this is absolutely the right public policy to follow. This is a critical crisis that we have to deal with, and safe injection sites are shown to make a real difference in saving lives, and they must go forward.
We're going to go to the phone lines now. Operator, please put through the first caller.
Our question comes from Don Braid of the Calgary Herald. Your line is open.
Premier, may I ask if you are at all concerned that cases keep coming up? The latest is the case of the woman who was shackled, a victim of sexual assault who was shackled. We had the earlier case of Serenity, which is a similar kind of case, even the Robin Camp case. All of these involve the way things are being done in our courts, and in each case, the government literally had to be told by somebody else rather than the government or the court system dealing with these things internally. Are you concerned that there isn't enough proper review or enough training, as Wild Rose has pointed out in this session, of judges? Because really, it's likely that not much would have happened in any of these cases unless they had been made public. Even to the extent where we had a judge in Calgary call reporters into the courtroom to say he couldn't find a mental health bed for a young offender. Do you have any response to that?
Well, I think, the judicial system is separate from the legislative system for a reason. And so I think, notwithstanding Brian Jean's rather wide-ranging commentary on that issue, I think you need to be very careful before digging into a wholesale critique of judicial conduct. And so quite honestly, I'm not going to do that. I know in the case of Angela Cardinal, as I've said in the House, and I'm happy to say again here, that I want to join with our Attorney General in offering the most heartfelt apology to Angela's family for the way she was treated. It was absolutely unacceptable. And I will say that I believe that the system failed her on a number of different fronts. And as we move forward to ensure that this doesn't happen again, we will focus mostly, of course, on the issues that we have direct and appropriate authority over, which is, the decisions of the Crown with respect to how they proceed under the criminal code, the issues around court services and their communication with sheriffs and remand, the issues around victim services, and the way in which Angela received support when going through this whole process. There's a number of places where that scenario could have been avoided, and it wasn't. So we need to look into that, and I know that Minister Ganley is absolutely focused on getting to the bottom of it and finding the multiple places where we need to intervene to ensure that that kind of tragedy never happens again. That's where our focus is.
If I could just ask again, of course, one respects judicial independence and all that, but nonetheless, Minister Ganley herself showed how involved the government could get in the Camp case, and I just wonder if there isn't more the government can do to ensure that the courts perhaps have the resources to ensure better review of judgments and comportment by judges and crowns and so forth in the courtrooms.
Well, I think, the Camp case was, of course, it was a different case in terms of the nature of the work that was done and the nature of the comments that he made. They were gratuitous and completely irrelevant to the case at hand, as opposed to the exercise of judgment around a request that was made to the judge. And I'm not going to get into a critique of the latter. I think that there's no question, and we have talked about the need, and I know the minister has been working with the chief judges to look at ways in which we can improve education for judges, particularly on issues around domestic violence and sexual violence, and the way in which we treat and perceive the victims, understanding that people who are poor and vulnerable are more likely to be the victims of crime. And the fact that they are poor and vulnerable should not change the way the court sees their primary role, which is they are a victim who deserves justice. And so I know that the minister will continue in collaborative work with the justices to improve that, and I'm quite sure that the justices are very interested in also moving forward on those issues.
Okay, thanks, everyone.